All right, so today we're going to be looking at how to put all the facial features we've been practicing drawing together on a face. And there are some basic rules for proportions of a human face that are just guidelines. Everybody, like I've mentioned before, everybody's face is a little bit different, but these are guidelines that when you're drawing a face will help you get the proportions at least close to right. A lot of times when I first start teaching portraiture, there are a couple of things that I notice that kids do. Number one is when they draw the face, they make it too round, and then they also tend to put the eyes up here, and that tends to not be right. They also tend to draw the eyes really big. This one's not even as big as what I'm talking about. Usually I get like eyes like this big. And you know, I know that part of this is style when we're doing cartooning and things like that, but when we're trying to draw someone realistically, a cartoon face, as cute as it might be, is not going to be the same as drawing someone in a realistic way. So today we're going to kind of abandon this cartooning way that we might do something and try to focus on making it realistic. One of the things I will say is if you love cartooning, once you know the rules and guidelines for how to draw something realistically, then you can play with the proportions for these kinds of things a little bit more interestingly when you do want to make a cartoon. So it will help you even if you are interested in cartooning. All right, so let's look at our friend Taylor here, okay? And I'm just using her as a basic guideline to point some things out to you. Thing number one. So the basic proportions of a human face, don't measure it from like the forehead down. We're measuring from the very top of the head down. And so if I measure her from the top of her head to her chin, it's about 6.5 inches. And so when we start thinking about where the eyes are, they're not up here. They're not super high up, and they're not gigantic. The eyes sit about halfway between the bottom and top of the head. So if I'm thinking of this is the top and this is the bottom, the eyes sit at about halfway through, okay? The other thing to notice about the eyes is if I ignore her eyeliner, her eyes are about that big. So then I've got room for 1, 2, 3, 4, almost 5 eyes across her face. And the rule of thumb is if a person is fully facing forward, she's turned a little bit in this image. If they're fully facing forward, you could fit about 5 eyes across where the line of where the eye sits. Okay. Then halfway down between the eyes and the chin, halfway between here and here, you get where the bottom of the nose is. And what we're seeing here is that the bottom of the nose means like where the ball of the nose kind of sits. You'll notice that the underside of the nose might go down a little bit past that line. And then halfway between the nose and the chin is where the mouth sits. So it's, you know, a half and then half of that and then half of that. Then we're looking at a little bit about proportions of how wide the nose is and how wide the mouth is. Sometimes people draw these tiny little mouths or these either really big or really small noses. The eyebrows give me an idea of about how wide the nose is going to be. So if I kind of line my eyebrows up with the edges of my nose, then that's about the width of the nose. And then about halfway through the eyes is the edge of the mouth. Again, she's turned a little to this side, so that gives me a little bit more room over here. Let's look at the ears. So the ears tend to be about where the top of the ear is about where the eyebrow starts, and the bottom of the ear is about where the nose is. So that's the basic proportion for an ear. So it doesn't, you know, a lot of people might put it a little lower or a little higher, but if I kind of line up the edge of it with where my eyebrows start and where my nose is, that's about right. You know, the shape of the ear, obviously everybody's is a little bit different, but if you think about it as a letter E or a backwards number 3 with echo of that within it, that's kind of the basics of an ear. And then the other thing that people do a lot when they're drawing heads is they make these tiny little necks like this wide. And the truth is that's not enough neck to support a head. You couldn't lift, if my neck was this little, I couldn't lift my head. So your neck needs to be about where your jawline starts is kind of where the neck would be. So I kind of imagine it coming down from the side of my ear, and once it hits that curve of my jawline, it kind of disappears and like goes a little bit at an angle usually. And then the shoulders, if you're going to fit all the shoulders in her case we don't, but another thing that people do is they make these tiny little shoulders sometimes when drawing a person, like, you know, like maybe like this wide with this giant head. And the truth is, if I was drawing her, I could fit one of her heads, and then another head would fit on one side, and another head would fit on the other. So the shoulders are about 3 heads across, and that gives the body the support that it needs to hold up that heavy brain that makes us all so smart. So really quickly, we're just going to do a basic sketch line drawing of the proportions of a human face. And then what you are going to do is take a picture of yourself and spend most of the class today sketching your own face. So let's just make this as a map for that. First thing we're going to do is we're going to start with an oval. While not everybody's face is an oval shape, you have square jaws, you have pointier chins on some people, you have rounder, fuller chins on some people. But in our case, we're going to start with just drawing an oval. And if you think of the oval being kind of egg-shaped and pointier on the bottom. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're just kind of using this as a guideline. Like this. Okay. All right. So I've got a basic oval shape. And I want you to lightly down the center of it draw this thing we call the line of symmetry. And I can see how unsymmetrical my poor person's face is at the moment, so I'm just going to adjust it a little bit before we move on. All right. So pretend that's symmetrical, even though I know it's not. So we've got an oval with a line of symmetry. The line of symmetry just shows me that I should have an eye on each side, a nostril on each side, you know, the edges of the mouth on each side, ear on each side, because the human face is basically symmetrical, even though it's the little asymmetric things that make us actually interesting and unique. Okay, so then halfway through this space, we're going to make a line. It doesn't have to be perfectly halfway, but about halfway. And that's where our eyes are going to sit, okay? Before we draw them in, though, we're going to draw in the rest of our lines. So halfway between here and here, we're going to draw a line, which as you remember is for the nose, and about halfway between here and here, a line where it's going to be for the mouth. Okay? And when we draw our eyes, remember we don't want these gigantic big eyes. We want to imagine that we could fit about 5 eyes across here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a mark that kind of tells me where the bridge of the nose is. Okay, so how wide that nose could possibly be. And then I could be like, okay, can I fit about, yeah, about. So knowing that my eyes are going to be about that wide, that gives me the distance. So what I kind of did is marked out how wide I thought the bridge of the nose might be, and then that let me make about how wide I think the eyes are going to be. If I think about this line kind of being where the tear duct is, I'm just going to put a little letter C there, and I'm going to use that. I could obviously do the whole thing that we've done, where we talk about the method of drawing in the shape of the eye socket. I could have done that first here, so like this kind of shape, just to kind of help me have the guideline. But, you know, this is a quick sketch, so I'm not going to do all the details. So here's the basic where my eye is. Basic where my eye is. And if it's not perfectly symmetrical, it's fine. We're just kind of sketching something in. Okay, so I've got an eye here, and then an eyebrow. We need that eyebrow there to help us find the ear in a few minutes. Okay, ooh, gosh, not symmetrical at all. Okay, but pretend it is. And so I've got an eyebrow, an eye, and I could probably fit 5 of them across. If I was really spending time here, I'd go in and do all my shading and details, but I'm not. But this just kind of maps it out for you, okay? So I got eyes. This part, I know I got to put a nose in there. And so I'm going to come down here, I'm going to draw the ball of a nose, and then I'm using my eyebrows to help me know how far over it goes. It kind of looks like they're crying. And I'm going to use that to help guide me to make my nose. So there's about how wide my nose is. That helps me know about where the bridge of the nose might go up there. And again, I'm not doing all the shading, I'm just kind of marking in where this stuff would be, okay? So kind of sloppy little map I'm making here. Okay, so I got my nose and eyes. I'm going to use the curve of the bottom of that to make the curve of the bottom of the lip here. There's the top of the lip. I'm going to come down from the edge, either side of my eye. If you remember, that's about the width of the mouth, so it should taper off on that side to make my mouth. And so I have a basic mouth shape here. Again, I'm being really loose and sketchy. This is not super realistic. I'm just making the proportions. Then over here, I'm going to use my eyebrow to help me know where the top of my ear should come and the bottom of my ear. Something kind of like this. And then there I got an ear. And then I would use that to kind of help guide me to make sure I get a neck. And then the other part, and the thing that I notice that kids have a hard time with, is hair. Obviously, if I'm drawing, I'm going to draw a boy on this side and a girl on that side. So, you know, if you've got short hair or your, where you can see your hairline, you might notice that it kind of goes, everybody's hairline's a little bit different. But you might have something kind of like this shape, and it might go a little bit past where the skull is, depending on how thick your hair is. And you might, you know, if you wanted to have some like little wispy hairs here, you could do that. You might have like curlier hairs, and so it might be more textured. So obviously you'd have to look at the person that you're drawing, but that hairline should come about, you know, everybody's is going to be different, but it's somewhere up here where you've got enough room for the forehead. And then if you've got bangs and longer hair or something like that, then the bangs could kind of come down. You always start by making the shape of the hair. And you know, I see some people start by trying to draw each hair. That would take you forever. But if you make the shapes of the hair and then kind of mark it into like different little sections, you know, you might have a little wave here and a little wave here. And some of this would be, if it's got a darker value, it could be tucked behind the ear, so it's a little darker. But thinking about hair in sections and shapes rather than single hairs will help you make your hair a little bit better. All right, this is a quick map. I hope you were able to follow along. In Schoology, I've put the steps for this as well, so you can follow along with those steps. And I want you to photograph yourself from the front and try to do a quick self-portrait today in class using the things that we've learned about how to draw the facial features and things like that. When you're starting to shade the face too, something to remember is that there might be, some of you might be having a little bit more shadow on the cheeks. Some of you might have a little bit of thicker shadow along the chin. All of the contours of the face, you're going to be able to begin to notice the different values that you see on the face when you start trying to shade it and where those values are. We haven't really gone over how to shade the cheekbones and the highlights on the apples of the cheek or things like that. but I want to see if when you're drawing it, you can begin to notice those things for yourself and see how that shows up in your picture depending on the lighting in the room. So today's class is a practice self-portrait, so let's see how you do.